𝕊𝕆₂𝕀𝔸𝕃𝕊 and welcome to another video. For today's video, it's going to be another Top 5 Wednesday, and this week's prompt is actually very exciting because it's got you into reading, which means we're going to talk about books that got me into reading. These are not books that specifically started my reading journey, but it's more of books that helped me start reading specific genres, because I used to have reservations in certain genres, but after these books, I began to realize that it's not the genre itself that is stopping me from reading the book, but it's more because I have not seen a fitting book until these certain books came in. And yeah, also some of the books here are books that got me out of a reading slump. So basically there are tweaks that I did to the prompt so that it will fit my, the books that I've read, and so that I can do a video for it. The first book in this list is Dark Matter by Blake Crouch. Before I read this book, I don't particularly read science fiction novels because I find them very difficult to read. I think that most of the books that I've read are highly informative in such a way that it drowns out the fun that I can get from the book, because there's just so much information to it that it's more of a heavy book that feels like a textbook rather than something that I will have fun reading. Dark Matter by Blake Crouch showed me that a science fiction novel can be both a book with informations to it, but it doesn't drown all the fun in reading the book. The next book is The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue by Mackenzie Lee. This is a historical queer fiction, and yeah, I don't particularly like reading historical fiction because, like science fiction, there's just so much information to it, and most of the time you have to have a little bit of a knowledge with the history that the book is trying to say. And although not all historical fiction falls into that sort of situation, I think most of them are. And The Gentleman's Guide really made historical fiction fun for me to read in a way that it incorporates well comicality, and at the same time, despite being historical fiction, it felt modern, and I think it's more because of Mackenzie Lee's writing. So I really learned from reading this book that it all depends on the writer that you are trying to read. You just have to find that right person that writes the way you want to read, if that makes sense. And Mackenzie Lee really did that for me with this historical fiction. The next book on the list is The Houseplant by our regular author, Jeremy Ray. The Houseplant actually is an interesting book about a plant. It is in the perspective of a plant. So if you're looking for something very unique, I think that this book is the right one for you. It helped me out of a reading slump, and it's a very short story, very charming, and it's fun. So I highly recommend it if you're just looking for some quick read and something that's light and will help you get out of your reading slump. The fourth book in this list is Misery by Stephen King. Stephen King and I have a very complicated relationship. I appreciate his writing style, but it just doesn't work well with me. I've read 2 books by him, I think, aside from this one. With this one, I listened to it in audiobook, and it is what introduced me to the possibility of enjoying an audiobook, because I have been trying to listen to audiobooks for quite some time now, and I haven't really gotten myself into that perfect, not book, but perfect timing, perfect pacing of how to read an audiobook. I just don't know what to do, how to read it. Do I read it while I'm cleaning? Do I read it while I'm doing this? Do I read it while I'm doing that? And most of the time, whenever I try reading an audiobook while doing something else, I just space out and completely forget that I'm even listening to something. So yeah, I'm lost with how audiobooks and I will work as much as Stephen King and I, but Misery was such a good audiobook. It's very entertaining, and the atmosphere of this story, that eeriness, that creepy vibe, the cruelness of the antagonist of the story is just wow, it blew my mind. It never occurred to me that I'd say I love a book by Stephen King and even consider it as a favorite, because Misery is very good. I really do think that it got itself in my favorite list, hands down, thanks to this audiobook. The fifth and last book in the list is American Gods by Neil Gaiman. I'm actually a little bit confused if it was American Gods by Neil Gaiman or Vicious by V. Schwab, but it's either of the two, which introduced me into reading fantasy stories. It showed me that fantasy cannot just mean epic fantasy or something fantasy with an entirely created new world. It introduced me to urban fantasy, which I absolutely love, because urban fantasy I think is easier, at least in my head, because you don't have to think a lot. You don't have to imagine everything that's been going on, because the world is the world we live in. So it's basically pretty straightforward, and the only thing that you will have to rattle your brain with is the magical system, the people, and if there are magical creatures in it, then I guess the magical creatures as well. But yeah, I didn't expect to really enjoy American Gods by Neil Gaiman. It is, of course, there are gods in the books, and Neil Gaiman really did well in incorporating the modern world with the old gods and the new gods that are created in this universe. So that's it for today's video. Let me know in the comment section which books got you into reading, maybe something that started you into reading, got you out of a reading slump, or perhaps a book that got you into a certain genre that you didn't think that you'd like. Thank you so much for watching, and I see you guys in the next video. Bye!